magical, and now I just keep on just saying that. Oh, I just heard that.
So I think we frame it as what Rock is doing, and then we open it up to like top issues. Housing, other issues on the table.
Does that sound
good? Yeah.
we all good?
Go all in on it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I got this set up. It's going to be via Zoom, but if everybody just wants to make sure that you're projecting your voice, hopefully it'll be, since it's a little bit quieter in here than it was at Lincoln Cafe, it'll be easier to catch up the audio. But it'll stream on YouTube too, so we'll have a recording of it.
Or no,
Yeah, well, I mean, we were thinking about putting it here, or we could put it maybe here.
Yeah, I don't mind turning.
Allison's like, I don't want.
no, you need to be on. Allison's always trying to go. It's not happening. And then maybe we ask. Hi, how are you? And then maybe turn the music down a little bit. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
You're not on it.
Yeah, Allison.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
You gotta keep going. Keep going.
Shift this way a little to bring you into the shot.
There you go. Well,
Perfect.
I think that's like your arm.
Good. Maybe if we angle it just slightly more this way. This way? Yeah. Oh darn! But then we're cutting it on you too.
I wonder if we
We should probably bring it back. Yeah, there we go.
I think Morgan would be better in my opinion.
when you push it up, it cuts two of
then we
us
can't see
out.
Oh.
That's why we split it.
Okay.
I mean, we don't want it to fall off the table.
I think we need to move down a little bit.
This. And everybody's on it.
He's back here.
Technical's always the
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
let's get started.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I'm Morgan, 9%. Hopefully everyone's aware of that. I think just to kick things off, we were gonna just go around and have everybody say what brought them today and share a little bit about yourself. So we'll start.
I'm Emily. I run.
And speak. Yeah.
Okay. I run the store on the south side of Columbus, the far south side. We work with folks who experience houselessness. So housing, like the topic of housing and what's going on in Columbus and how that affects everybody is why I'm here.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm her operations manager, but why I came to work for her campaign is because there needs to be a change. Tim Ryan is actually from my district. I am from Nelson. And he's been in politics for a very long time. And the status quo is just not enough. It's time for us to make a change, to demand change, and to stick up for the people who are talking the change. You can't just keep saying they're the person while our communities continue to fail. Enough is enough. When are we going to take action in our votes? Because we have the power. So kind of pushing that narrative right now. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
I'm Mindy, and what am I? I'm a retired teacher. I was president of our local union for the last 11 years of my teaching. And as a busy teacher, as a union president for lots of years, I always went with Ohio Education Association. Who are they endorsing in elections? Who does the Ohio Democratic Party endorse? That was what I followed. I didn't have time to study things, and I retired almost 5 years ago, and now I can be me. I can research. I have time to research. I have time to get to know people. And I met Morgan when she was primarying Joyce Beatty. I was handing out sample Ohio Democratic Party ballots, which her name was not on. And Joyce Beatty's name was on, and as we were talking together, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I don't live in District 3 because you are so compelling. I don't know what I would do. And then when Morgan said, I'm in, I've just been attached to her campaign and organic my own way because this is so important that we vote for change and the people who can make a difference have to step forward and talk to anyone and everyone they know. And I'm also a ward chair for the Franklin County Democratic Party. And so I'm learning firsthand the way things work. And it's probably not shocking to any of you, but it's been super eye-opening to me, and I won't be quiet anymore. And I've had lots of hard conversations with people, and I'm approaching it as I'm pro Morgan Harper. I'm not anti anything. I'm pro. It's about love. It's about bringing people together, and so that's what brings me here today.
And my name's Blake. I'm here as somebody who works with Emily and also representing the Party for Socialism and Liberation in Columbus. I'm here today to bring a socialist and a working class perspective to the conversation.
I'm Chris Johnson. I'm a real estate investor and comedian. And I think I'm just, like you said, pro Morgan Harper, but I'm also anti-Tim Ryan. That's one. And I came for the tea.
My name is Quasi. I would come anytime Morgan asks me to do anything, and I'm available. I'll be there. I worked on her congressional campaign, and I wanted to work on this campaign, but like I had some health issues that made it not possible for me to do that. I had to focus on myself. So like another reason I'm here is because I got a chance to get out the house. I feel good today, and I'm here. But I mean, in a greater sense, like what Morgan is about, is so that we became friends. You know, I've just been thinking about that. I've had a lot of time to think, and Morgan is one of the few people I consider a friend, and like a real friend. And it's because she is really about something that means something. And people that say that it's a risk and, you know, are on the fence, and, you know, you got to think about like real life issues like healthcare. You know, healthcare became a serious issue in my life when it wasn't last year. So like when we started to talk about these issues and see the real impact of people's lives, somebody that's willing to really talk about and stand there and be there and be a friend, you know, seeing so many aspects of Morgan as a leader and as a friend. And, you know, I think we will all benefit from seeing her be in the Senate.
I'm Ramon. I'm a Columbus organizer. I run a group called Just, where we feed over 400 people a month. We provide them with free clothing, necessities that are needed. Morgan has actually volunteered with our organization a couple of times, and to actually have somebody come out and show that they actually care about the people who are affected by a lot of these issues is a lot to me. Because it's something that I have to say for many of the people running in this race currently. And to see her come into certain communities, such as the Black community, I mean, right now, Black-owned business is just perfect. You know, it shows that she's serious and that she's willing to take the necessary risks to get us into a position where we can show true power.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Ernest Burt. Appreciate being here, getting the invite to Moses. You know, I've been rocking with Morgan since I met her. You know, she's always been down to earth, straight shooter. And I'm most excited about pulling people in who didn't typically care about politics or gave them a reason to care. So, you know, I might get a call, I'm sure.
So the question right here is how
What brought you here? It could be an issue, it could be, yeah.
Okay, definitely. Well, first of all, I appreciate the fact that everyone has shown up to our restaurant, run the business with my family. My name is Moses. And one thing that made me resonate with the conversation today is just, I can tell that Morgan really is trying to get to the heart of the issues and solve real problems and pull in different resources, even if you disagree. But at the end of the day, trying to make sure that we're really taking care of the next generation of people who are coming in and growing up in our country today and in our state. And so to me, I always care. What pulls me in is people that are responsible, people that really care, and people that really want to do the right job and are not big enough, feel like they're big enough to not work with different people, even though they might disagree. So to me, that always pulls me in. So I appreciate that.
Thanks for hosting us.
Definitely.
So yeah, shout out to Flavor 91. If people don't know about it, and you're in Columbus, yay. Yeah. So I guess just to kick things off is, so people kind of mentioned, what brought them today, but in terms of, okay, we're 13 days out from an election day and the primary day, May 3rd, voting's already started. When you all think about whether you are going to vote and what drives most of your vote from an issue perspective, what are you most focused on, or what do you wish that other people were most focused on as from like a top issue priority? Does that make sense?
I keep coming back to something that I've learned the hard way, and pardon me for this, but this whole liberal white woman saving the world kind of thing. And I'm going to say that probably at one point along the way in my teaching career, I probably was defined as that. And that was part of me working through a process of learning what this country really is all about. And in the last 5 years of my teaching, I was an 8th grade American history teacher. I thought I was teaching from multiple perspectives. I didn't really begin to understand systemic racism until I retired. So in my mid-50s, someone who was doing a whole lot more than most people I knew in education as far as bringing in alternative voices and narratives that weren't in the textbooks, I was doing a lot and I was missing the mark. But like, I kept learning new things thinking, oh my gosh, I need to apologize to my students. And so I am seeing a huge disconnect between people like me. When I say like me, it could be educators, it could be white suburban women. The like me can be whatever you want it to be, who have a Black Lives Matter sign out, or at protests, go to rallies, say all the things, read all the books, or in all the book clubs. But then they shut the door and then they go vote for someone like Tim Ryan. And that's why it's not that I'm anti Tim Ryan. For me to get more people in those categories to vote for you and listen to you, I have to listen to them too. But I'm so sick of hearing and seeing so many people I know and connected to saying all the right things, but it all being bullshit. And I'm free to talk about it here because I don't really know anyone here. but
just to know YouTube is active.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I don't know who's watching. I've been pretty honest, but I haven't been honest in that way with people. And I'm just, and because I have no ties, I don't have to worry what the school district's going to say. I don't have to worry about my job. I don't have kids. I don't have a spouse who is a Trumper or anything ridiculous like that. And I know a lot of people like that. It's real.
Yeah.
I can just be me, and I know that that's gotten some votes for Morgan from people who otherwise wouldn't have.
I find it hard to think about like a particular issue. I mean, obviously healthcare is something I've mentioned. There's other issues that come up. I was watching this documentary the other day and you were saying something you might hear somewhere else, suggesting that like it would take 500 years if all the legislation that was like redlining and stuff like that was been enacted over the years was taken away. It would take like 500 years for Black people to catch up just under normal circumstances. So it's so convoluted to think about issues. It's hard to kind of pin down the issue. I think, and I'm know that you have insight into that I don't have. But I think another thing that is kind of coming before even getting to those issues is like having those conversations to where people let the guard down, because I don't even think people know how to vote in their own interests ultimately. Like we have these walls in the way that make us think in a way that is being kind of leveraged for us to think for some outside agenda. I don't know if I just said too much or how we even get to that, but like the opportunity for people to just let walls down and see things from multiple perspectives seems like it even comes. I know we have 13 days, you know, but,
like what issues are you noticing all of the top 3 or 5 that you're seeing?
Well, you know, it's funny that Chrissy put it like that, because I think that's kind of right. I mean, part of, to me, the barrier of folks that you're describing, Mindy, sort of like becoming more open-minded, is they're aware of things like the work that you all are doing, right? It's like, we are in an emergency situation here. And if you aren't aware of that, well, God bless, but you do need to get out more. And we're in an emergency situation on a number of front: housing, systemic racism, small businesses have been going through a major emergency over the last couple of years. Money, I mean, people don't have enough money. It's not working. And so I find that, you know, if there's certain people that have woken up to that more so over the last couple of years with the pandemic, but if you haven't clicked in that way, well then, yeah, you do feel comfortable on a Zoom call asking me whether or not I'm going to work to get out the vote after a primary. What are we talking about? We need to be talking about what are people experiencing out here, and build that awareness. Because if you had an understanding of that, then it wouldn't be about voter turnout. It would be about connecting with people with some like ideas, solutions, whatever, right? It's not about elections. This is, I say that, you know, with some humility as a candidate who's 13 days away from one, but it's about people. It's about us. What is going on? What have we created? What have we allowed to continue? So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm pushing back on my own question through Tracy's input and also from Mindy, that I want people to know, I feel like that's my role, is communicating what people are experiencing, because a lot of folks don't have the privilege to just be out here talking to people all the time, trying to connect these dots, and that's why we wanted to bring people together. So
when you talk about legislation, for example, that can cancel student debt or can address impoverished communities or address raising the minimum wage and creating a livable wage, what kind of legislation can make that come to pass, and what are the repercussions of it, the positive consequences?
Well, I think that's what's interesting too, is like, well, you know, a refrain that I've said a lot is like, we don't have a policy problem, we have a politician problem. How do we raise the minimum wage? We pass a law that says it's going to be higher. You know, it's like, it's not complicated. How do we cancel student debt? We pass legislation that's going to cancel it, or Biden can just do it. And actually, most people agree with these ideas, but the fact is, most people don't control the political system. 84% of people, based on polling, support things like increasing the minimum wage. But there's a very narrow percentage of people that are driving what ends up being the political agenda, who's always voting, who votes in the primaries, who determines who gets through all these things. So that is what we need, is like mass mobilization of real people who understand what's happening out here to then change what ends up becoming the political reality.
I really appreciate what you're saying about mass mobilization and changing the political reality, and also what Kwesi had to say about you know, the redlining and what the actual consequences would be if, you know, all of the redlining and systemic racism were to disappear, but then you know, everything were to be left to its own devices. There would still be 500 years of catch up to do. In terms of issues, I think, you know, what I'm looking for and what a lot of the folks we're talking to out on the ground are interested in is, you know, do we have somebody who is willing to speak for the people and not just convey the message that, you know, people actually have to say on the ground, but also present an analysis of why this system continues to push narratives and agendas through a very narrow set of candidates that appeal only to a very narrow set of people. You know, do we have we're looking for somebody who has an analysis, a firm class analysis of where the ownership is and how and why the people who own everything are able to control the narrative of that entire system.
Yeah. Do you want a response?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I mean, because I have one. I mean, so the reality is, yes, there are a few large multinational corporations or a few ultra wealthy people who have figured out through lobbying, changing laws to lay the groundwork for economic dominance of every market sector of the economy. So it becomes harder for small businesses to compete because you're not just competing against other independent businesses, you're competing against giants, even if they have different names around them. And then using that dominance to buy off our government.
Right.
Through contributions, the lobbying, all of that. And what happens after 40 so years of all of that? Chaos,
Exactly.
resource extraction. We would be surprised if anyone, the fact that anyone in all of this does okay, that should be shocking, right? Because we've laid the groundwork for all of us to be struggling all the time in any, whether it's violence, whether it's just, wages, all of it. So the question is, to me, how do we get people to realize this? And then how do we actually, in a very accelerated way, try to change course?
Right.
And I don't think we have a lot of time left, in my opinion.
Right, and I know you have talked to me and some other folks on the party before, and you know that we believe the answer to that is to course correct to a socialist course of action. So I'm really interested in your openness to that kind of idea and that kind of program and project. Obviously, we believe that under our current system, we're always going to be struggling against, all of these different systems of oppression intersecting in the way they do under racialized capitalism. But we're really interested in your willingness to, to profess the correctness and the opportunities presented by a socialist program.
Might be a longer conversation. Sorry, not to get too political, but yeah.
I just gotta thank Mindy for being so self-aware that you can say that out loud. I appreciate you very much. I think that's America's original sin, but it's bleeding into other classes of people.
So what's the original sin?
Systemic racism, like she was talking about. I think you get a real good glimpse of that in the educational system. And I get a good glimpse of it as a real estate owner. With people of different demographics, I see, how their children are raised and the circumstances in which they live. And even as a business owner, it's easier for me to rent to homeless people. I mean, it's a good thing that I can put homeless people in rooms, but it's easier for me to rent a room to a homeless person for $500 than it is for 3 or 4 rooms than it is for me to rent to a regular person for like $900. Like, people can't really afford to live. These are not great big houses. It's 3-bedroom places. Some of them are gentrified. Kind of sad to see regular people not being able to sustain modest lifestyle.
Well, we're short 54,000 units for affordable housing just here. And we know that we can build that housing because Nashville last year built 45,000 units 1 year. We are at one of the highest in 17 years for buildings, but that's still extremely low. We should be building 14,000 units a year just to keep up with the current demand. We're not even building 8,000. But yet we've given out hundreds of millions of dollars to developers to come here and build luxury housing. So we built from 2010 to 2020, we built a 54% increase in luxury housing. In that same time period, we saw affordable housing go up by 3%. 2016 to 2020, the city spent $20 million demolishing 900 vacant houses. 20 million.
So we're just creating a population of people who don't have anywhere to go.
Exactly, and the city's current solution to that, under the policies that we have seen enacted through our direct outreach to the communities of the unhoused who do have their homes here, what we have seen is that the city's current policy is to use both state and para-state forces to systemically harass and persecute these people, to force them out of the city limits, out of the city's jurisdiction, so that they become somebody else's problem.
And we use our police, our Columbus Police Department, to engage in this hostility, to clean out camps with the Salvation Army and land management so that they can put a development in there. We have people that are in, we have somebody who was at the varsity of the Salvation Army, and Columbus Police Department sent out 4 people, one of them in a bulletproof vest, to do a camp clean out on a Tuesday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, yelling at all of the people that they're drug addicts and they don't deserve to have this consideration. While we have a 20-something-year-old laying in her tent dying of full-blown AIDS. This is where
Any given day.
This is where our money goes. This is their huge budget goes to harassing people who have nowhere to go and there's no repercussions.
And arresting people. More prisons.
Yeah. And then how do you dig yourself out of that? You get fines on top of fines that you can't pay, which turn into warrants. And then you can't even be out in the open. You're constantly on guard of where you have to be. And then when you do try to get services, you're denied. You can't get public housing if you're a felon.
There's a lot of people that are going to vote that haven't voted yet. There's a lot of different people at this table that do work in so many different ways to help people. At the end of the day, just trying to help people. But we definitely want to get more of them elected, you know. And I think it sounds like in this conversation, what an obstacle is getting people to realize that it's in their best interest, and like people that are already going to vote, you know, because it sounds like a lot of people are just checked out. And we can't necessarily expect them to even have the capacity to go vote. You know?
Right. Well, and you run into barriers because if you don't have a house, you can't register your address. You can't vote. So you're shut out.
Well, and I think that is, you know, the primary thing, why primaries are so important is because they are when very few people participate. And then that drives who ends up being the general election nominee. And if that general election nominee is always the same old type of person, well, then people look at that and they're like, I don't care about this. And then they don't participate. And then rinse, recycle, repeat, you know, all of it. And so, but I am curious about different views from folks of what does it take for people to open? Because that is kind of if we like pull out to national democratic, you know, or political strategy, all of this comes down to a race to figure out how you get people to motivate to care. And the reason why, if we're just focused on, you know, I'm running as a Democrat, okay, why the Democratic Party doesn't do better in Ohio, it's especially because a lot of Black voters don't turn out. So, or that the people who are most likely to turn out, I'm going to point directly at you, Minnie, but you know, that it is a lot of suburban white people that drive the Democratic primary vote. So to vote differently. What's the barrier, you know, like what's the perspective just either as individuals or in your networks that you hear from people? Yeah, just curious.
For me, in my network, it's for the Black vote, it's the lack of education. It's really just going to be the lack of education. Because at the end of the day, like someone said earlier, we continuously have problems. Well, it's bigger than who's getting elected, to find out what they're running for, what their issues are, and how they affect us on an everyday basis. For me, personally, I feel like it has to be very comprehensive, how a step-by-step almost, how it affects literally your everyday life, like how it really boils down to why you can't. So I have cousins that are single moms, and when they call me about frustrating things that they're going through in their lives, I'm, no, don't complain. Did you vote? because these are things that, you know, you're yelling about childcare. These are these small things that we're talking about, as small as a vote, but they don't understand that it literally comes down to a vote because they don't know who these people are. They don't know if they really have their best interests at heart. It really, for me, it's just the lack of education of how it affects you personally. And then when people use, I always say, big words, because when you go to debates, when you go to forums, you know, your politicians or your politicians, they're always using you all these big words to throw you off. And I'm like, they're not really saying anything. Like, you know, I'm sorry you don't, you know what I mean? You know, they're not saying really anything. They're trying to throw you off to act like they're more intelligent than what they are. They're just throwing nonsense out. You know, if you really listen, or even Google it, Google what they said. It's nonsense. 9 times out of 10 is nonsense. So, but when you already blow their mind with something that they don't know already, and then blow their mind more with education that they might feel like they don't know, big words, then they shut down. So then they won't be engaged. So you have to be able to engage them with information of how they talk to, like, just talk to them how we're talking right now. You really have to, and really, I'm trying to work on something, but the education is really like breaking down how this affects you on your everyday. So mom and dad go to work. This is what happens when they go to work. You have to be taken care of. This has to be taken care of. If they know what it is that, how it affects them regularly, to their money, to everything, to where they can live, then I feel like that will engage them. Because if you really think about it, that it'll enrage you like it enrages me, because it's just power, and you can't step out on power. I can tell. I said a millionaire does not run for an office that pays less than his yearly salary if it's not for power. So if I have a power issue, so I don't like anybody trying to rule me with their power. So for me, especially rule me wrong and suffering. So for that, I'm going to push back just because of that. So that's just how I see it.
Back to the education, kind of what both of you were saying, like, just really driving home how significant the primary is. Something that I think if you ask 5 people to explain what the primary is, they're like, "What's the primary?"
Right.
You know, at least
Right.
3 of them would.
Right.
You know, one of them probably would say, you know, explain exactly what it is and say, "I voted in regular." Maybe 1 in 5. I don't know where I'm getting these numbers from, but I would like to try it. You know, just go out and ask 5 random people. I'm pretty sure I would wager that not very many people, especially that on the fence voter that we're talking about, know about what the primary even is, let alone the importance of it. And you know, I think so. That's like the on the fence voters. It's like too. We're talking about educating people, like the people that are on the fence, educating them on the primaries. When they pick the Democrat, we want to run against the Republican. That the Republicans chose who they want, and then we vote for against the Republican and the Democrat. But understanding that when, you know, the on the fence voting class and the people that maybe historically don't vote, when they start moving in the direction of understanding that or not, that affects the bottom line of the middle class. That's the education that they need, is that whether or not these people are voting or able to vote or have the education to be able to vote in their own interest affects you. Talking about social services, talking about welfare, talking about all these different things that people complain about on the back end, but you know, everything has a cost.
Right.
You know, and I think it's just kind of continuing the education piece is definitely like education that needs to happen across the board.
What do y'all think about I hate to say this, they say to fund the police, but what about the funding of politicians? Is that way out? I've never asked you about this, but like, what do y'all think about capping the money that politicians can make for being in office?
Yeah, over half of our Congress is millionaires.
That was the root. I mean, follow the money, right?
I mean, it's money is always the root of all evil. So, I mean, you know, when you are, like you said, they're lobbying, it's all self-interest. So, I mean, It's really the true sin out of this country.
Well, yeah, I mean, reducing salaries of politicians, that's an interesting concept. There's always, and there's been legislation to try to cap just how much money politicians can take, but then it doesn't pass because, you know.
They
Shocking.
want to have money.
But right now, I mean, people who are in Congress, they're making six figures. And so that's been one of the things that I found has surprised people and then appeals to a really diverse set of people is when I say I'm self-imposing term limits, that somehow you would actually cut off the gravy train on your own, right? Even though 2 terms the United States said is actually 12 years. That's kind of a long period of time. But when you think about once these people get in, they literally die in these seats. Then it's like, whoa, you're gonna like self-impose that? We don't have to wait for legislation to do the right thing. I mean, in some ways you just have individuals that are just gonna do the right thing. But I'm in support of that. I don't understand why you make so much money. If you made less, for sure people would do it for a shorter period of time. Because you're getting 6 figures, there's no real accountability, and a lifetime pension and healthcare. Who would not take that deal?
And, the ability to like trade stocks and stuff. Remember that right before COVID and all the politicians seemingly knew how to do it.
Yeah. Yes.
Insider trading is permitted as long as you are an insider.
Right. Well, and now and after all of that got exposed, well, now there's a bill to ban sitting members of Congress from actively trading stocks while in office. But before that, I mean, the initial reaction from the Speaker of the House was like, well, this isn't a problem. What's the big deal?
Because she trades stocks.
Yeah, and she's a multimillionaire.
Right.
Yeah. So
It's okay. I mean, if you want to make money, but make sure, you know, everybody can make money.
So I think that's the opportunity though, you know, in terms of like where we're at right now is more and more people have an awareness of the fact that this is all pretty corrupt. And to me, on the Republican side, they've taken advantage of that to then continue to kind of like spread lies on what they plan to do with it. But we, as another party, as a Democrat, haven't really had a counter that is anti-corruption or trying to actually be something more. And until we do that, we will lose. So getting back to the conversation that we were referencing about, like, well, what's the risk here? To me, the risk is continuing to believe that by putting up folks who are taking money from large corporations, who have no agenda that's going to radically change anything for working people in this country, that they're going to win somehow. It's not happening because people are aware that the hypocrisy is out of control.
There's so much propaganda, though. I mean, just people, I'm shocked at how many people don't even realize they've been brainwashed. People in the party. Well, this is who the party endorsed. Of course I'm gonna vote for that person. That's the best person. And that works.
Right.
And so the conversations I've had with people have been kind of like all over the place. I'm keeping them all above board, but I can't get over how many people truly align to so much of what you say, but there's not even a question in their mind that they're voting for Tim Ryan. And these are intelligent people who are critical thinkers, and some of them who think outside the box. And I keep posting all these things trying to, I'll have one person in mind. It might even be a very good friend, and I'll write something and I'll post it on Facebook hoping it hits home and they take it in. Who knows if any of that hits, you know, but
yeah,
it's amazing to me.
Just
It's
so deeply programmed that it doesn't penetrate.
I think a lot of people don't realize that literally everything like all of the media messages we're saturated with, even the ones that we think are not political, every single one is political. Even, I know you mentioned folks who are, leaning towards, the more Republican side of the voting bloc, despite agreeing with policies that would align more with what, policies that align more with what Morgan has mentioned. On the other hand, I also see people who vote Democrat, people who would even describe themselves as being further left than Democrat, who are being really, really deeply influenced by local news media messaging that is working really hard to give people the impression, for example, that there is some kind of massive spike in crime that is an immediate threat to us all and that requires immediate monetary investment in more police and more militarization of the police. That's just one example, but we're all being bombarded with these messages all the time, and all of it is ideological.
Well, and that, one recent incident related to the campaign and all this was this Hilliard schools thing that happened. I don't know if you all saw that, but got invited by some students that were protesting the Don't Say Gay bill, Hilliard schools, public school. And outside football field, they invited, let administration know. And then a couple days later, I get a Twitter DM from the legal counsel for the Hilliard School District that I was trespassing and that I'm permanently banned from Hilliard school property. And so that, okay, interesting enough. But the local news, TV, the Dispatch article is actually pretty good. The local TV, which a lot of people watch, I think the local TV news, their whole focus is on trespass. Well, Morgan Harper trespassed, Senate candidate trespassed. And then when we had a press conference to kind of clear the record on that question of like, well, did you trespass? It's like, let's be clear what's going on, because you're right. We're not breaking things down in most media about what's actually happening. This is an attempt by the Board of Education to distract people from the fact that there is a bill that is going to restrict our rights and freedoms, and they're trying to make sure that no one in Hilliard is talking about that. And then trying to punish students and anyone who's supporting students who are going to speak out against that. Because a lot of teachers actually, even if they disagree, aren't free to do that because of their professional position. So, but if you just see that news article, well, then that's what you're left with, right? So that, I mean, I identify what makes me hopeful. What makes me lean towards despair is that we have such a high hurdle of people aren't getting clear information from the media. People are busy. We've created economic stress that makes people increasingly unable to have free time to actually think through what's going on around them and connect these dots. And how do we overcome that? And in a very quick way, because things aren't trending in a better direction. And that is the question of our time. So, I mean, I know a lot of people here are actually engaged and we're all doing all that, but I don't know, I'd be curious in just like, do you feel like more people are sort of waking up to the stakes of what's happening out here and what we're up against? Or
I mean, I think it takes a lot of resilience to because people lie to themselves, which is, let's be honest, we're all lying to ourselves in some way or another. I think this is just my opinion. Maybe I want to have a high opinion of myself, but I think one of the reasons I'm here at this table want to fight these issues because I lie to myself less than most people. Just want to say that, but we all lie to ourselves, and that's how I can kind of look at the next person like, man, they must have really been through something tough to be in a place where they can't face this reality. Because I've gone through some tough things, and then so I've lied to myself to deal with that reality. Then I had to come back and deal with the lie, and then deal with the thing that I was lying about. It takes a lot of resilience.
Most people don't want to do it. It's a lot of work.
It took a lot to just say that.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? I do that on their personal lives, so
I think too, like people are so busy working so much to try to stay afloat that can't really see a whole lot until it's right in front of you. So you're not really worried about how much your rent is going up until you can't afford it this month, right? And you didn't realize food went up all this much, and you have now spent even more than you normally
And
would.
part of that lying to yourself, sometimes you're just neglecting stuff. Sometimes you're just not paying attention. Then like all of a sudden you have this insurmountable obstacle that you've been dealing with all this time. You just don't have to do everything. I put that bill off, I put this off, and then it all comes like everybody needs their money at one time, you know?
Because I mean, it's self-preservation, right? Because we're so overwhelmed with everything going on, we can't deal with a lot of that stuff. And so we do put it off until we can no longer afford to put it off.
And I think one of the things that's happened is kind of put a positive note on, we want to win this election, you know, but what I value about Morgan and about everybody, well, I just meeting some people, but some of the people at the table I have worked with, and know that when things didn't go the way we wanted to, we were still at the table the next day. And I think that's what it takes, win, lose, or draw. This is what we were called to do, and this is what we have to do when we could do it, sometimes you gotta sleep, sometimes you gotta hide from people for 6 months, and do what you gotta do to take care of yourself. That's the other part, is the self-care. And then that way we can care for each other.
Yeah, we love our community. That's why we're here. Otherwise, we also have our time. So I think that is like, we come together because we care, because we love this community, because we don't want to see our neighbors be houseless or hungry, or we want them to have representation so they feel like their interests are being served. Absolutely.
Positive. Well, I'm curious about like the entrepreneur perspective. You both are kind of doing your social entrepreneurship business. What are you hearing in your networks too?
Very, very No, I mean, I just want to echo the point about people are too focused on their daily lives and really pick their head up and look at the issues that's going on. But I think it's all about relationship building. That I can pull you over, I can leverage the relationship I got with you. Like, look, I know you care about me, I care about you. Let's go work together. So that's my opinion.
That works. That's good. That's good. Because we're saying, what's our message? Get 3 friends. Triple it. That's good. Have you heard anybody mention anything about celebrating?
How are you getting the word out? What are the different ways that you've been utilizing your platform to let people know there is the same race going on, and this is what I'm running on? These are the things that I really care about. These are the work that I'm doing in that area.
Well, I mean, we always rely on social and then just going to different events and things, but there are some, institutional barriers to getting the word out. Like the party, for example, the party doesn't want people to know that I'm running or about our campaign, because if people knew, then it would be a fair fight. That you would actually just be able to, you don't have to overcome all these barriers because you're busy. You would just be presented with, hey, here are the 2 candidates, here's what they stand for, and we're gonna have, here's what it could look like in my perfect world. And we're gonna have open sessions all over every city in Ohio with the candidates to have to share what you stand for. So it's not a lot of burden on the individual to put in the time to do research, to look it up. It's like, we're bringing the information to you. So they don't do that. They want to be able to coast through with the chosen person. And so, that's why grassroots, we're trying to just actively get the word out. But, it's limited resources, people busy all day. So we really rely on folks that are learning about it to then spread the word within their networks. And I do believe that actually is the most authentic way, because I don't know. I mean, when's the last time just some like random voice telling you to do something and you're listening to? It's like, no, it's going to be someone that you actually trust, that who influences how you think about it.
Mindy, I actually have a question for you. You said you're a chairperson on the Democratic Board of Elections?
Democrat, Franklin County.
Franklin County?
I'm not a board chair.
Franklin County
County
Democratic Party. Okay, right. So yeah, that's one of the things that we talked about, was how the Democratic Party will endorse a primary candidate. That's pretty I don't think that's maybe somewhere where the traditional voter might not ever have time to, the steady, consistent voters might not have ever thought about how problematic that is. Is that something that's influenceable?
Well,
how influenceable is the Democratic Party?
Not, but
It's about the chosen. It is.
But it's kind of like every vote matters for Morgan each time we get another voter. So I feel like I'm new to this. This is just my first term. And I feel like more people need to get involved who are willing to speak up, who don't have an agenda except to make the community better. And there are 2 sides usually to the agenda. There's the side that wants to tear it all down. And there's the side that wants to keep it established. And I'm like, wait, there's some of us that aren't that. And I'm trying to find ways to speak up in a positive, non-tearing down way to encourage. I've been teased before that I wear rose-colored glasses, and I'm kind of an optimist, but so the real answer is I don't think it's very influenceable, but I'm going to continue to keep this position unless someone wants to run against me, because at least, as Charles Traylor says, you either have a seat at the table or you're on the menu. So, and I don't, and I actually am not going to be on the menu, whether I'm sitting there or not, which is also important. And I have said that to many of my friends that are planning to vote for Tim Ryan, who already have, you know, coffee shop in the suburbs. I had this conversation one day and I'm kind of like, here's the bottom line. Whoever's elected, 3 of us sitting here at this table, we're going to be fine. It's the people who aren't going to be fine. That's who I'm voting for. And that's the disconnect. And so when the person was talking about relationship building, I mean, he was talking about it as far as taking people to vote, but that's what has to happen. We have to be creating relationships in disjointed communities and finding ways to connect, and that doesn't happen overnight, but yeah, it's got to keep happening.
Try to do it in comedy shows. I got one tomorrow at Scully. I'm gonna try to stay on the topic of politics as long as I can, but I don't have so many 7-syllable words. I'll try to.
I really agree with what you're saying about the Democratic Party not being influenceable. I think we have seen over the last few election cycles, and particularly over these last few years of Biden being in office, that the Democratic Party is just deeply, deeply committed to upholding the status quo and kind of acting as the PR wing of that status quo, while the Republicans act as the shock troops of that status quo. So just to kind of sum it up there, but in terms of like how we can influence them, I feel like, you know, we need folks who are willing to completely, you know, kind of pivot away from what is acceptable in, you know, in the tiny Democratic Overton window and really speak to the people themselves, separate from what the party is willing to put on that table.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And that's, as you know, that's kind of like what people are like, how do we do this? I'm like, by finding more real people who think like they do, which is not how the typical person that's very deeply involved in party politics thinks and doesn't want to live like this anymore, by banding together and doing it. And you know, in terms of like what that style of leadership looks like too, I mean, I think it's a different calculus when you're not trying to build a career in it. That's what something I've said a lot too. It's like, well, Morgan, what does it look like? You know, you going to the United States Senate, grassroots candidate, whatever, versus someone like a Tim Ryan. It's like, I don't care about staying there. And that is like radically different from most people. Like, I've already been to Washington. Usually that's the like cherry on top of some career where you've done the right thing, been there, saw it was corrupt, left, doing other things. And I'm going to be in people's face about, hey, you're blocking progress here. Put it on YouTube. I don't care. You know, it's like, I'm not looking to make friends. I'm looking to get things done. That's how regular people think. That's what we need in representation in these offices, and being willing to take some risks with that. The times demanded it long ago. So now we just have to get it done.
Well, is anybody, we're a little, we're a
You
bit
want
over.
last
Yeah,
question,
last
maybe,
question.
yeah.
Last one.
So if you are to get past the primary, what are some of the actions?
When?
When you do, you know? What are the action steps that you take moving forward to continue that momentum, to continue all the things you're talking about
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
getting things done, and those things that are going to, what are
Yeah.
those actions?
I mean, I can't wait in that way. And you know, so past the primary within the general. And it turns out actually doing the right thing, like all the things we discussed, having more authentic leadership that's willing to push the envelope, that's talking to real people directly. This is the message that I'm trying to get through to Democratic voters is that's our only hope of winning this election, it turns out. Because people see through, like we saw, like we were talking about, all the hypocrisy of the alternative, which is just typical career politicians about themselves and the status quo, and they're no longer voting for it. We won't win. And so post-primary, it's like just building off of everything we're doing, but with a lot more resources to connect with as many people as possible across our state who are continuing to see that we're not going to accept the status quo anymore, and we need to take over. That's what's necessary, and we'll be able to build that out over the next several months and obviously beyond. So let's do it.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here for the conversation. Thank you again, Moses, for having us.
Yes. Labor 91. Thank you, everybody, for staying.
Thank you.
All right.
End the live.